The ink on the magistrate's decree was barely dry when Xavier Thornwood learned he would be taking an orc wife, and judging by the nervous looks the settlement officials kept exchanging, his assigned bride had quite the reputation. The spring morning had started peacefully enough on his small homestead at the edge of the Graythorn Valley settlement, but the arrival of Magistrate Hollies and 2 armed guards made it clear his bachelor days were about to end in the most unexpected way possible. "Mr. Thornwood," the magistrate began, his voice carrying the weight of reluctant authority, "as you know, the treaty with the northern orc clans requires integration between our peoples. Every unmarried male settler between the ages of 18 and 40 must take an orc wife within the fortnight." He paused, clearing his throat. "Your assigned match is Greshka Ironjaw." One of the guards actually winced at the name. The other stared firmly at the horizon as though willing himself to be anywhere else. Xavier set down the fence post he had been securing and wiped his hands on his worn trousers. At 26, he had spent the last 4 years carving out a life in this frontier territory, building his farm from nothing after his service in the border wars ended. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and the kind of quiet strength that came from years of hard labor and harder battles. "I have heard the decree. When do I meet her?" The magistrate exchanged another glance with his men. "That is the matter we need to discuss. Miss Ironjaw has been assigned to 3 previous settlers. Each engagement was dissolved within hours of the initial meeting." "Why?" Xavier asked, though something in the official's expressions already told him the answer would not be pleasant. "She bit all 3 of them," the younger guard blurted out. "Drew blood each time. The last one needed 12 stitches. Xavier absorbed this information with the same calm he had once employed when facing enemy cavalry charges. Panic served no purpose and fear even less. "Did they mistreat her?" The magistrate looked surprised by the question. "They claim they did nothing wrong, simply attempted to establish the household arrangements and she attacked them unprovoked. And her account of events, she refuses to speak to any official. The orc clan elders say only that she will fulfill her obligation under the treaty, but they offer no explanation for her behavior." The magistrate straightened his official robes. "Mr. Thornwood, I must be frank. Your military record and your reputation for level-headedness are the reasons you were selected for this particular match. If this arrangement fails, it could undermine the entire treaty. The Valley's peace depends on these unions succeeding." No pressure, Xavier thought, but he simply nodded. "When does she arrive?" "Tomorrow at midday. We will escort her here personally." The magistrate's expression softened slightly. "I know this is not the life you envisioned, but the survival of this settlement requires sacrifice from all of us. The orc clans control the mountain passes and the northern forests. Without this treaty, we face either constant warfare or abandonment of everything we have built here." After the officials departed, Xavier stood in the middle of his modest farmyard and surveyed his domain with new eyes. The cabin he had built was solid but small, designed for a single occupant. The fields were productive enough to sustain one person comfortably, with surplus to trade. He had a dairy cow, chickens, a rooster with a vicious temperament, and a plow horse named Bramble who was far too clever for her own good. It was a peaceful, solitary existence. And tomorrow, a woman who had bitten 3 men would become his wife. Xavier spent the remainder of the day preparing. He built a second bed frame from split logs and rope, setting it up in the cabin's single bedroom while he moved his own bedding to the main room near the hearth. Whatever else happened, he would not force sharing sleeping quarters on someone who clearly did not want to be here. He cleaned the cabin more thoroughly than he had since moving in, scrubbing floors and washing windows until everything gleamed. He checked his supplies of food and noted he would need to hunt soon to have enough meat to feed 2 people. As dusk fell, he sat on the porch steps and wondered what could drive someone to such violence. The orcs he had fought during the wars had been fierce, yes, but also honorable. They followed codes of battle that many human soldiers could learn from. The treaty had come about precisely because both sides had grown weary of bloodshed and recognized that the frontier lands were vast enough for all peoples if they could learn to coexist. But coexistence and marriage were very different prospects. Sleep came fitfully that night. Xavier found himself repeatedly waking and staring at the ceiling, imagining dozens of scenarios for the next day, each more absurd than the last. Would she attack him immediately? Should he have weapons nearby, or would that seem threatening? Did orcs have courtship customs he should know about? By dawn, he gave up on sleep and threw himself into morning chores. He milked the cow, fed the chickens, repaired a weak section of the chicken coop fence, and groomed Bramble until the horse snorted in annoyance at the excessive attention. Anything to keep his hands and mind occupied. Midday came with the spring sun warm overhead and the sound of multiple horses approaching. Xavier walked out to meet them, his heart steady despite everything. The magistrate arrived first, followed by the 2 guards, and between them rode an orc woman on a massive gray warhorse that made the human mounts look like ponies. Greshka Ironjaw was not what he had expected, though Xavier was not entirely sure what he had expected. She was tall, nearly matching his own height, with the powerful build of someone who had trained as a warrior. Her skin was a deep forest green, and her black hair was bound in multiple braids decorated with small bones and metal rings. She wore leather armor, well-maintained but bearing the scars of use, and her tusks curved up from her lower jaw, small but prominent. Her eyes, a striking amber color, surveyed the farmstead with an expression that managed to combine boredom and contempt in equal measure. Those same eyes flicked to Xavier with undisguised hostility. The magistrate dismounted and helped Greshka down, though she clearly needed no assistance and looked annoyed by the gesture. A small trunk of belongings was unloaded from one of the guards' horses. "Mr. Thornwood, may I present Greshka Ironjaw of the Northern Wind clan?" The magistrate gestured between them awkwardly. "Miss Ironjaw, this is Xavier Thornwood, your intended husband." Greshka said nothing. She crossed her arms and stared at some point past Xavier's left shoulder. Xavier stepped forward and offered a slight bow, the kind he had once given to enemy officers during parley discussions. "Welcome to my home. I hope we can find a way to make this arrangement bearable for both of us." Her eyes snapped to his face at that, and something flickered in them, too quick to identify. But she remained silent. The magistrate produced a scroll. "The ceremony will be brief. By the authority of the Graythorn Valley Settlement, and in accordance with the Treaty of Mountain Shadow, I hereby declare Xavier Thornwood and Greshka Ironjaw to be wed. The union is binding until death or mutual dissolution approved by both human and orc authorities." He looked between them. "You may seal the marriage." "Seal it how?" Xavier asked. "Traditionally, a kiss, but given the circumstances, a handshake will suffice for the official record." Greshka turned her head and spat on the ground. The younger guard's hand drifted toward his sword. Xavier caught the movement and shook his head sharply. The last thing this situation needed was weapons drawn. "I think we will skip the formalities," Xavier said calmly. "The marriage is legal either way, correct?" "Yes, yes," the magistrate said hurriedly, rolling up his scroll. "Quite legal. We will leave you to become acquainted." He and his men mounted up with barely concealed relief and departed at a pace just short of fleeing. Xavier and Greshka stood in the farmyard, watching the dust from the horses settle. Chickens clucked nearby. Bramble whinnied from the barn. The rooster, sergeant major, crowed his territorial challenge at nothing in particular. "Your bedroom is ready," Xavier finally said. "In the cabin. I moved my things to the main room. You will have privacy." Greshka's head turned slowly toward him. She studied him with such intensity that he felt like a manuscript being read for hidden meanings. "Why?" It was the first word she had spoken, and her voice was lower than he had anticipated, with a rough quality like stones grinding together but not unpleasant. "Why what?" "Why give me the bedroom? Why offer privacy? What do you want in return?" Xavier understood then. The 3 previous men had made demands, had assumed rights they had not earned. "I want nothing you are not willing to give. You did not choose this marriage, and neither did I. But we are bound by it now, and I see no benefit in making us both miserable." She snorted, a sound of pure disbelief. "You are human. Humans take what they want. Some do. I am not some. Pretty words. I have heard pretty words before." She bent and picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing, though Xavier could see it was heavy. "Which building is mine?" "The cabin." "The main cabin, I mean. There is only one." She walked past him toward the structure, her movements controlled and purposeful. At the door, she paused. "I will not share your bed. I will not cook your meals or mend your clothes or play at being a human wife. And if you try to touch me, I will do worse than bite you." "Understood," Xavier said simply. She disappeared inside and slammed the door hard enough to make the shutters rattle. Xavier released a breath he had not realized he was holding and looked around his farmyard. Well, that had gone about as well as could be expected. No blood drawn, no one injured, and she had not burned down the cabin. He was counting it as a victory. He gave her space for the rest of the day, busying himself with outdoor tasks while she remained inside. He worked in the fields, turning soil and checking the young wheat shoots. He repaired equipment and split firewood, and tried not to think about the fact that there was an extremely hostile orc woman living in his home. When evening came, he realized he needed to address the question of dinner. He had caught fish from the stream that morning, and he cleaned them outside, building up the fire pit he used for outdoor cooking during warm weather. He roasted the fish with wild herbs and some early carrots from his garden, making enough for 2. When the food was ready, he approached the cabin and knocked on his own door, feeling absurd. "What?" came the sharp response. "I made dinner. I am leaving a portion by the door." Silence. "Then I am not hungry." "I will leave it anyway, in case you change your mind." He set down a wooden plate with a generous serving of fish and vegetables, then retreated to eat his own meal by the fire pit. The evening was beautiful, all purple skies and the first stars emerging. He had always loved this time of day, when the work was done and the world grew quiet. The cabin door creaked open. He did not turn around, focusing intently on his food. He heard light footsteps, a pause, then the door closing again. When he glanced over, the plate was gone, progress perhaps, or maybe she had thrown it to the chickens out of spite. Either way, she had opened the door, and that was something. Xavier slept outside that night, bedroll laid out under the stars. It was not particularly comfortable, but it seemed important to give her space, to let her feel secure in the cabin. He lay awake for a long time, watching constellations wheel overhead and listening to the sounds of the farm. At some point, he heard the cabin door open and close, heard footsteps moving around the farmyard. He kept his breathing steady, feigning sleep, and eventually the footsteps returned to the cabin. She had been checking her surroundings, learning the territory. Smart. The next few days established an uneasy pattern. Xavier worked the farm, maintained careful distance, and left meals for Greshka at regular intervals. She remained in the cabin or emerged only when she thought he was occupied elsewhere. They did not speak. She did not attack him, which he considered a positive development given her history. On the fourth morning, Xavier woke to find his woodpile neatly restacked. The haphazard pile he had been pulling from for weeks was now organized by size and type, stacked in a way that would shed water and allow for proper drying. He stood staring at it for a long moment. She had done this. Sometime in the night, Greshka had come out and performed a chore without being asked. He did not mention it, did not thank her or acknowledge it in any way. Instinct told him that making a fuss would only cause her to retreat further. But he made sure breakfast that morning was especially good, using the last of his precious honey to sweeten the porridge and adding dried berries. The plate left by the door was returned clean later that day, set carefully on the porch railing. Another night, he woke to the sound of something moving near the chicken coop. He grabbed his knife and moved silently through the darkness, only to find Greshka standing perfectly still, her hand on the coop's door. In the moonlight, he could see the fresh scratches on the wood, the bent hinge he had been meaning to fix. "Fox was trying to get in," she said without turning around. "I heard it and drove it off." "Thank you," Xavier said quietly. "I did not do it for you. I did it for the chickens. They should not suffer because humans are too lazy to maintain proper defenses." "Still, thank you." She walked past him back to the cabin, and he spent the next day properly securing the coop, reinforcing weak points and adding a better latch. When he finished, he found a small pile of suitable stones near his workspace, perfect for the support structures he was building. Stones that had not been there that morning. 2 weeks passed in this strange dance. They existed in the same space but separate orbits, occasionally intersecting but never colliding. Xavier learned her patterns. She was an early riser, often up before dawn. She moved with absolute silence when she wanted to. She was stronger than any human woman he had ever met and stronger than most men. Sometimes he caught her training in the pre-dawn darkness, running through combat forms with deadly precision, her movements beautiful and terrifying. She began to emerge during daylight hours, though she still avoided direct interaction. She would sit on the porch and work on maintaining her armor or sharpen her weapons, always positioned so she could watch him work but maintain distance. Xavier found himself talking as he worked, not directly to her, but aloud in a way he had not done since living alone. Commenting on the weather, on how the crops were coming in, on Bramble's latest clever escape from her paddock. He did not know if Greshka listened or cared, but the words felt right somehow. Filling the silence without demanding response, one afternoon, as he struggled to move a heavy stone from the field he was trying to expand, a shadow fell over him. "You are doing it wrong," Greshka said. He looked up, startled. She had not initiated conversation before. "What? The stone. You are trying to lift it. You should lever it." She pointed at his crowbar, currently lying unused a few feet away. "Set the fulcrum here, apply pressure at an angle, and the stone will roll." Xavier studied the situation and realized she was absolutely right. He repositioned as she instructed, and the massive stone shifted far more easily than his previous direct attempts. "Better," she said, then walked away before he could respond. But the next morning, when he went out to continue clearing that field, he found Greshka already there. She did not greet him or explain her presence. She simply picked up the crowbar and started working on the next stone. They labored side by side for hours, developing a wordless rhythm. When they broke for water, she accepted the ladle from his hand without flinching away. "You were a warrior," Xavier said. It was not a question. Everything about her proclaimed it. "I was." She took a long drink. "I am, Being forced into this mockery of a marriage does not change what I am. I know, I was a soldier myself. Border wars. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp and evaluating. Which regiment? 3rd Cavalry, Eastern Front. Something shifted in her expression. I fought at the Battle of Crow's Ridge. Your 3rd Cavalry held the line when the rest of your army was routing. We respected that. And orc warriors dragged 3 of my injured comrades back from no man's land under a white flag during the siege of Thornpoint. I respected that. They regarded each other, and some barrier between them cracked, if not quite breaking. Why did you stop fighting? She asked. The war ended, and I was tired of killing. I wanted to build something instead of destroying. He gestured at the farm. This is not much, but it is mine. I made it. Why did you not take a human wife? There must have been women in the settlement who would have you. Xavier shrugged. I never found the right person, and then the decree came and the choice was made for me. He met her gaze steadily. Why did you bite the others? Greshka bared her tusks in an expression that was not quite a smile. The first one grabbed my wrist before I had even entered his house, and told me I would learn obedience. The second one had already prepared a contract listing my daily duties, and informed me that orc women needed firm discipline. The third one tried to kiss me while his hands went places they had no invitation to go. Rage, cold and fierce, flashed through Xavier. He kept his voice level. They deserved worse than bites. She tilted her head, studying him again with that intense focus. You really believe that? I do. The treaty requires marriage, not slavery, not assault. Most humans do not see the difference, not when it comes to orcs. Then most humans are fools. Greshka laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. You are an odd one, Xavier Thornwood. It was the first time she had used his name, and something about hearing it in her rough voice made his chest tighten strangely. After that day, things changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in small, accumulating ways. Greshka began to work alongside him regularly. She was extraordinarily capable, her warrior's strength and discipline translating well to farm labor. Tasks that would have taken Xavier days took hours with her help. She started cooking, though she claimed it was because his cooking was barely adequate, and she refused to eat bland food. Her meals were heavily spiced in the orcish style, full of bold flavors that made his eyes water at first. But he grew to love them, and she began to add less fire to his portions without comment. They ate together now, sitting on the porch in the evenings. Conversation came more easily. She told him about growing up in the Northern Wind clan, about the harsh mountain territory and the honor culture of her people. He shared stories of his childhood in the southern provinces, of the poverty that had driven him to military service, of the friends he had lost in the war. Do you regret it? She asked one night. Being assigned to me. You could have had an easier match. Xavier considered the question seriously. No, I think an easier match would have been false from the start. You are honest, Greshka. Fierce and angry and difficult, yes, but honest. I would rather have that than comfortable lies. She was quiet for a long time. The others made me feel like a monster, like something to be tamed or broken. You do not look at me that way, because you are not a monster. You are a person who was put in an impossible situation and responded the only way you knew how. I could have handled it differently, not bitten them. Could you? Xavier met her eyes. You are a warrior, Greshka. Fight or flight is your instinct, and you are too strong to choose flight. Maybe biting them was actually restraint. You could have done much worse. Her laugh was genuine this time, warm and surprised. Are you praising me for only biting them? I am saying I understand, and I am grateful that you have not bitten me for what it is worth. The night is young, she said, but there was humor in it now, not threat. As spring deepened toward summer, the farm flourished. With 2 people working, they accomplished more than Xavier had dreamed possible. They expanded the fields, improved the irrigation, built a proper smokehouse for preserving meat. Greshka had a gift for animal husbandry. The cow produced more milk under her care, and even Sergeant Major the rooster seemed to respect her, which Xavier found both impressive and slightly insulting. The settlement magistrate visited to check on the marriage's progress. He looked shocked to find them working together, clearly having expected to arrive to either a murder scene or a dissolved marriage. "Everything is in order," Xavier reported. "We are managing well." The magistrate peered at Greshka, who was repairing the barn roof with impressive efficiency. "And Miss Ironjaw is, adjusting adequately. My name is Greshka," she called down without looking. "And I am adjusting as well as anyone would when forced into a marriage with a stranger. But the stranger is decent, so it could be far worse." The magistrate seemed unsure how to respond to that. He departed quickly, and Xavier and Greshka shared a look that was almost conspiratorial. But despite the growing ease between them, certain boundaries remained. They still slept separately. They worked together, ate together, even laughed together, but there was a careful space maintained. Xavier was intensely aware of it, of how he made sure never to touch her accidentally, how she positioned herself always with an exit route clear. He was also becoming intensely aware of other things. The way her braids swung when she moved, the exact shade of green her skin turned in different lights, the rare, brilliant smile that transformed her entire face when something genuinely pleased her, the competence in her hands as she worked, the sound of her voice when she sang orcish songs while performing tedious tasks, not realizing he could hear. This was dangerous territory. She had made clear what she would not offer. Desiring more than she was willing to give would poison everything they had built. So he kept his distance and tried not to think about how the cabin felt empty when she was not there, or how he had started listening for her footsteps, or how her rare praise for his work meant more than it should. Summer arrived with the heat and the hard work of harvest approaching. They would need help bringing in the wheat, and Xavier arranged to trade labor with his nearest neighbors, the Carver family who lived 3 miles east. It would be the first time Greshka encountered other settlers beyond the magistrate's formal visits. He worried about how they would treat her. The Carvers were decent people, but prejudice was commonplace, and he found himself tense with protective instinct as they arrived. Thomas Carver, his wife Miranda, and their 3 half-grown sons came up the road with their own wagon. They stopped short when they saw Greshka. "Thornwood," Thomas said carefully. "This is your orc wife, then?" "This is Greshka Ironjaw," Xavier said, his voice carrying a warning note. "My wife and my partner. She will be working the harvest with us." The youngest Carver boy stared openly. "Is it true you bit 3 men, Marcus?" His mother hissed, but Greshka laughed. "It is true. They deserved it. Want to see my tusks?" She bared them in an exaggerated grimace, and Marcus's eyes went wide, but he grinned. "That is terrifying." "That is the idea," Greshka said. She looked at Thomas. "I am strong and I am an experienced worker. I will earn my share and more. If that is acceptable," Thomas assessed her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Lord knows we can use the help." The work was brutal, long days of cutting wheat, binding sheaves and loading wagons. But Greshka worked with tireless energy, outpacing even Thomas's sturdy sons. By the second day, the Carvers were openly impressed. By the end of the first week, when they took a break for lunch, Miranda was teaching Greshka a human folk song, and the boys were pestering her with questions about orc fighting techniques. "Your wife is remarkable," Thomas told Xavier quietly as they watched Greshka demonstrate a defensive stance for the fascinated boys. "Not what I expected." "She is more than I ever expected," Xavier said, and meant it in ways he could not fully articulate. The harvest stretched over 3 weeks as they moved from farm to farm, helping each household bring in their crops. Greshka's reputation transformed before Xavier's eyes. The woman who had been whispered about as dangerous and uncontrollable became respected, even admired. She was strong, yes, but also patient with children, kind to animals, and willing to help anyone who needed it. One evening, as they walked back to their farm after a long day, she was quiet. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked. "That I did not expect humans to accept me. The clan elders said I would be treated as a servant at best, a slave at worst. They chose me for this marriage because I was too difficult, too resistant to the idea of integration. They thought putting me with humans would break my pride. And has it? No, but it has changed my understanding." She looked at him. "Not all humans are the same. I knew that intellectually, but knowing and experiencing are different things. You have shown me that difference. You showed yourself. You let them see who you are. Because you made it safe to do so." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The setting sun cast her in shades of gold and shadow. "Xavier, I need to tell you something." His heart beat faster. "What?" "This marriage, this life, it is not what I wanted, but it has become something I value. You have become someone I value. And I do not know what to do with that." The honesty in her words struck him deeply. "I value you too," he said quietly. "More than I should, perhaps. You made it clear what you wanted and did not want from this arrangement. I have tried to respect that. You have. You have been honorable in every way." She stepped closer, her amber eyes searching his face. "But what I wanted when I arrived and what I want now are not the same thing." "What do you want now?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "I want," she said slowly, as if testing each word, "to stop sleeping in separate rooms. I want to stop pretending that we are just partners sharing space. I want this marriage to be real." Xavier's breath caught. "Greshka, I will not pressure you if you have any doubt at all." "I am terrified," she admitted. "Every instinct says that letting myself want this is dangerous, that caring for you gives you power to hurt me, but I am tired of living in fear. And I think maybe you could be different, are different." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from work. "I cannot promise I will never hurt you. People hurt each other sometimes without meaning to, but I promise I will try my best not to. I promise to respect you always, and I promise that what I feel for you is real." "What do you feel?" She asked it like a challenge, but he could hear the vulnerability underneath. "At first, I thought we could manage a peaceful coexistence. Then I started to admire you, then to like you. And somewhere along the way, I started to fall in love with you. With your strength and your honesty and your terrible cooking before you figured out I cannot handle as much spice as orcs." She laughed, a sound with tears at the edges. "My cooking is excellent. You just have a weak human palate." "Probably," he agreed. "Is it all right that I love you?" "It should not be," she said. "This was supposed to be a punishment, a forced assimilation. But instead, it has become the first place I have ever felt like I could be myself fully and still be accepted." She squeezed his hand. "So yes, it is all right. Better than all right." They stood there in the road as the sun set, holding hands like uncertain teenagers rather than two battle-hardened warriors. It should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That night, they reconfigured the cabin's sleeping arrangements again, this time together. It was awkward and sweet and tentative. They lay in the darkness talking for hours, sharing things they had never told anyone. She told him about the scars on her back, earned in training and battle. He told her about the nightmares he still had sometimes from the war. She admitted she had been afraid he would be cruel and had planned how to survive or escape. He admitted he had been terrified of failing, of driving her away, of proving that peace between their peoples was impossible. "We are both fools," she said finally. "Agreed," he said and kissed her forehead carefully. She turned toward him, her amber eyes reflecting starlight from the window. "You can do better than my forehead, human." So he did, and it was nothing like he had imagined. It was better. Real. She tasted like the spiced tea she favored, and her tusks were smooth against his lips, and when she made a soft sound of pleasure, his heart felt like it might burst. They took things slowly despite the long weeks of growing tension. There was no rush now. They had time. They had commitment. And when they finally came together fully, it was with the same partnership and care they had brought to everything else in their shared life. The summer passed in a golden haze of work and harvest and deepening love. The settlement's other mixed marriages varied in success. Some couples found genuine connection. Others maintained polite distance. A few dissolved, though fewer than the magistrate had feared. Xavier and Greshka's marriage became something of a model, though that was not their intention. They simply lived their lives, worked their farm, and made no secret of their affection. When they went to the settlement for market days, they walked hand in hand. When other settlers expressed shock or disapproval, Greshka would bare her tusks in a challenging grin, and Xavier would shrug as if to say, "Your problem, not ours." The Carver boys started bringing their friends around to learn fighting techniques from Greshka. She began teaching informal classes in the settlement square twice a week, showing humans and orcs alike the basics of self-defense. It became a gathering point, a place where the two peoples mixed and learned from each other. But not everyone was pleased with the treaty's success. There were humans who resented the orcish presence, who saw integration as a betrayal. And there were orcs who felt their kin had been sold out, forced to give up their culture and identity. The trouble came on a crisp autumn morning. Xavier was in the northern field, harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first frost, when he heard Bramble's distressed whinnying from the barn. He ran back to find 3 men he did not recognize holding the horse's reins, while a 4th attempted to force open the cabin door. "Can I help you?" Xavier called out, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. The men turned. They were rough-looking, dressed in mismatched armor and carrying weapons openly. Not farmers, not soldiers, something in between. "We are collecting the bounty," one of them said. "Nothing personal." "What bounty?" "The Northern Wind clan has offered gold for the return of any of their people forced into human marriages. Especially warriors like Ironjaw. They want their fighters back." Xavier's blood ran cold. "She is not property to be collected. She is a free person and my wife. Leave now and we will forget this happened." The man laughed. "Big words from one farmer. There are 4 of us and one of you. Hand over the orc woman and nobody gets hurt." "I am not in the cabin," Greshka's voice came from behind the men. She had emerged from the smokehouse where she had been working, and now stood with her sword drawn. "But I appreciate you assuming I would need to hide while my husband faces threats." The men spun, suddenly finding themselves caught between Xavier and Greshka. The odds had shifted, but not enough. 4 experienced fighters against 2, even with Greshka's skill, was dangerous. "We do not want to hurt you," the apparent leader said to Greshka. "We are just giving you a way home, back to your clan where you belong." "I am home," Greshka said coldly. "This is where I belong." "And you are trespassing. Your clan is paying good gold. They said you and others like you were taken against your will." "I was assigned against my will," Greshka acknowledged, "but I choose to stay, my choice, and you are not taking that from me." The men exchanged glances, recalculating. Xavier used their moment of uncertainty to move closer to Greshka, putting them back to back. a defensive position they had never discussed but fell into naturally. "We are not looking for a fight," Xavier said, "but we will give you one if we must. Leave now, do not come back." "The bounty is too good to pass up," one of the other men said, and lunged. What followed was brief and brutal. Greshka moved like water and lightning combined, her sword deflecting attacks while her free hand struck with devastating precision. Xavier fought with the economy of motion learned in the cavalry, his knife finding gaps in defense. One attacker went down screaming with a slashed leg. Another fell unconscious from a blow from Greshka's pommel. The leader stumbled back, suddenly realizing he was outmatched. "Go," Xavier said, breathing hard. "Take your wounded and do not return. Tell anyone else with ideas about bounties that Greshka Ironjaw stays where she chooses, and that choice is protected." The men fled, dragging their injured companions. Xavier and Greshka stood in the farmyard, adrenaline still racing, weapons ready in case they returned. "Are you hurt?" Greshka demanded, running her hands over his arms and chest, checking for wounds. "I am fine. You?" "Fine." But her hands were shaking slightly as she sheathed her sword. "They came for me, put you in danger because of me." "No," Xavier said firmly, catching her hands in his. "They came because they are greedy and foolish, and they failed because we are strong together. Your life would be simpler without me. My life would be empty without you." He pulled her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. "Greshka, do you want to go back to your clan? If you truly want that, I will not stop you. I will help you however I can. But do not leave because you think you are protecting me." She pulled back enough to look at him. "You would let me go. Even though the marriage is binding, I would hate it. It would break my heart, but I would let you go if that was truly what you needed." He cupped her face gently. "But is that what you want?" "No," she said fiercely. "No. I want to stay here with you in the life we have built. The Northern Wind clan is my blood, but this is my home now. You are my home." They stood there holding each other until the shaking stopped, until the danger felt truly past. Then, wordlessly, they began to prepare. If bounty hunters had come once, they might come again. They fortified the farm, set up warning bells, arranged for the carvers and other neighboring families to watch for strangers. Xavier rode to the settlement and reported the attack to the magistrate, who promised to send word to the orc clan elders that such bounties were violations of the treaty. But more than physical preparation, the attack changed something fundamental between them. The last walls came down. They had fought side by side, protected each other without hesitation. Whatever their marriage had begun as, it was real now in every way that mattered. 3 weeks later, a delegation arrived from the Northern Wind clan. Greshka tensed when she saw the banners, but Xavier took her hand and they walked out together to meet them. The leader was an older orc woman, her gray streaked hair bound in elaborate braids, her armor bearing marks of high rank. She studied Greshka for a long moment before speaking. "I am Thraka Stoneshield, war leader of the Northern Wind clan. I have come to see the situation for myself." "Mother," Greshka said, and Xavier understood everything in that single word. Thraka's eyes moved to Xavier, assessing. "So you are the human who tamed my daughter." "He did not tame me," Greshka said sharply. "He treated me with respect and gave me space to choose. There is a difference." "Is there?" Thraka stepped closer. "The clan paid bounties to give our people a way home. You chose not to take it. I need to know why." "Because home is not just about blood and clan," Greshka said. "It is about where you belong, where you are valued for who you are, not just what you can fight. Xavier sees me as a whole person. The clan only ever saw me as a warrior, as a weapon to point at enemies." Thraka's expression flickered. "Is that what you believe?" "It is what I know. I was chosen for this marriage because I resisted, because the elders thought I was too difficult, too proud. They wanted to teach me a lesson. They wanted to protect you, Thraka said quietly. The elders believed that assigning our strongest warriors to these marriages would prevent abuse, that humans would not dare mistreat someone who could defend themselves. She looked at Xavier. But we did not anticipate that some humans might actually be decent. That this treaty might lead to real partnerships, not just political arrangements. Xavier met her gaze steadily. I love your daughter. I know that probably does not mean much to you, but it is the truth. She has made my life better in every way, and I would do anything to protect her happiness. Pretty words, Thraka said, echoing Greshka's first response weeks ago. What do they mean in practice? They mean I give her choices. They mean her voice matters as much as mine in every decision. They mean I would let her go if she asked, even though it would destroy me. He glanced at Greshka. They mean I am grateful every day that she chose to stay. Thraka was quiet for a long time. Finally, she turned back to Greshka. You are happy here. I am. Happier than I ever was in the clan, if I am being honest. Then I will not interfere. But know that if circumstances change, if he proves false, the clan will take you back. You are still one of us. I know, Greshka said softly, and that means more than you realize. Thraka nodded to Xavier, a gesture of respect between equals. Treat her well, human. She is worth more than gold. I know, Xavier said. I promise I will. The delegation departed, and Greshka stood watching them disappear down the road. Xavier put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him. Are you all right? He asked. I am. It is strange. I spent so many years trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to be the perfect warrior. And now I have found something better than approval. I have found acceptance. You are extraordinary, Xavier said. In battle, yes, but also in the garden with the animals, in every part of life. I hope you know that. She turned and kissed him, soft and lingering. I am starting to believe it. As autumn deepened toward winter, they prepared the farm for the cold months ahead. The harvests were stored, the animals secured, the cabin reinforced against the coming snows. They worked together with the efficiency of long practice, anticipating each other's needs and movements. Word of Thraka's visit and approval spread through both human and orc communities. It lent legitimacy to the mixed marriages, showed that the treaty could work on a personal level. Other couples began to find their footing, taking courage from Greshka and Xavier's example. The magistrate visited again as the first snows fell. I wanted to thank you both, he said. Your marriage has become a cornerstone of the treaty's success. The other couples look to you as proof that this can work. We did not set out to be an example, Xavier said. We just tried to build a good life. Sometimes that is the best example of all, the magistrate smiled. There is another matter. The settlement council has voted to grant you both additional land, 50 more acres to the north. You have proven to be excellent stewards, and we want to encourage that. After he left, Greshka and Xavier stood looking out at the snow-covered fields, imagining what they could build with more space. We could have a proper orchard, Greshka said, and expand the livestock. We would need to hire help eventually, build additional structures, a larger operation. A real farm, not just a homestead. She grinned at him. Think you can handle that, with you as my partner? I can handle anything. They spent the winter planning, drawing up designs, arguing cheerfully over details. The cold months brought them even closer together, the enforced indoor time filled with conversation and laughter and lovemaking. Xavier taught Greshka to read and write in human languages. She taught him orcish songs and stories, sharing the culture she had come from. Do you ever regret not having a normal courtship? Xavier asked one evening as they sat by the fire. We had everything backwards, married first then fell in love. I do not believe in normal, Greshka said. Normal is boring. We have something better. Something we built ourselves, not based on what we were supposed to do or feel, but on who we actually are. When did you know? He asked. When did you realize you loved me? She thought about it. The day you stood between me and those bounty hunters, knowing you were outnumbered, not even hesitating. I already cared for you before that. But seeing you willing to fight for me, for us, that was when I knew it was love. She traced his jawline with one finger. And you. The night you stacked the woodpile. That was the first moment I thought maybe we could be more than just polite strangers. But I think I truly fell in love watching you teach those children to defend themselves. Seeing your patience and care, seeing you give back to a community that had not always welcomed you. That was when I knew you were everything I could ever want. Spring came early that year, the snows melting to reveal brown earth ready for planting. They began work on the new land, clearing and preparing. The carvers sent their sons to help, and several orc families offered assistance as well. The farm became a gathering place, humans and orcs working side by side. One warm afternoon, as Xavier and Greshka took a break from planting, she set down her tools and turned to him with unusual nervousness. I need to tell you something, she said. His heart jumped. What is wrong? Nothing is wrong. At least, I do not think it is wrong, but it is unexpected. She took his hands. Xavier, I am pregnant. For a moment he could not process the words, then joy crashed over him like a wave. Really? Are you certain? I am certain. I have all the signs, and I visited the midwife in the settlement yesterday. She confirmed it. Greshka searched his face anxiously. I know we have not discussed children, I know this is fast, but I find myself happy about it, and I hope you are too. Xavier laughed and swept her up, spinning her around before carefully setting her down, suddenly aware of her condition. I am thrilled. Terrified but thrilled. We are going to have a baby. Half human, half orc, she said. The first child of such a union in this settlement. I wonder what they will look like. Beautiful, Xavier said with certainty. They will be beautiful because they will be ours. The news spread quickly, and to Xavier's surprise, it was met with almost universal celebration. Mixed-race children were rare but not unheard of in the wider world, and they represented the future of integration in a tangible way. The settlement rallied around them, offering advice and baby clothes and offers of help. Greshka's pregnancy progressed well, though she refused to slow down until Xavier finally put his foot down in the 7th month and banned her from heavy labor. She grumbled but complied, focusing instead on preparing the cabin for the baby and teaching more defense classes. On a hot summer evening, just as the sun was setting, Greshka's labor began. Xavier ran for the midwife while Thraka, who had been visiting, stayed with her daughter. By the time he returned, Greshka was already deep into the process, her warrior's discipline helping her manage the pain. It was the longest night of Xavier's life. He held Greshka's hand, whispered encouragement, and tried not to let his fear show. Childbirth was dangerous even in the best circumstances. Mixed-species births carried additional unknowns, but Greshka was strong, and as dawn broke, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that could probably be heard 3 farms over. She was perfect. Her skin was a light green, softer than Greshka's deep forest tone. Her ears were pointed but small. She had tiny tusks just beginning to emerge and a shock of dark hair. Her eyes, when she opened them, were Xavier's gray-blue. She is beautiful, Xavier whispered, awestruck. She is perfect, Greshka agreed, exhausted but beaming. What should we name her? They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision. But looking at his daughter's face, Xavier knew. Rose, for beauty that has thorns, for something that thrives in difficult soil. Rose Thornwood Ironjaw, Greshka said, testing the name. I like it. It honors both her heritages. Thraka looked at her granddaughter with something like wonder. She is the future, she said quietly. Living proof that our peoples can not just coexist but create something new together. The settlement celebrated Rose's birth as though she belonged to everyone. And in a way, she did. She was a symbol of hope, proof that the treaty was not just political necessity but genuine possibility. As Rose grew from infant to toddler, the farm prospered. With help from their growing community of both human and orc friends, Xavier and Greshka built their small homestead into a thriving operation. They cultivated the new lands, expanded their orchards, and raised quality livestock. But more than material success, they created something else. A place where people from both races felt welcome, where children of all backgrounds played together, where the old prejudices mattered less than the content of one's character. On Rose's second birthday, as Xavier and Greshka watched their daughter toddle around the farmyard, chasing chickens and laughing with pure joy, they reflected on how far they had come. You remember how we started? Greshka asked. You must have been so afraid when you learned about me. I was, Xavier admitted. Afraid I would fail, afraid I would make everything worse. I never imagined this. He gestured at Rose, at the thriving farm, at the mixed group of friends gathering for the birthday celebration. I never imagined I could be this happy. The magistrate ordered every settler to take an orc wife, Greshka said thoughtfully. He thought he was forcing integration, but what he actually did was give people like us a chance we never would have taken on our own. I would never have chosen to marry a human. You might never have chosen me. But we were pushed together, and we made something beautiful from it. I got the one who bit 3 men, Xavier said, pulling her close. Best assignment I ever received. She laughed and bit his shoulder gently, not hard enough to hurt but enough to make her point. And you are the one who did not deserve to be bitten. The universe works in strange ways. As the sun set on the celebration, as friends and family gathered around their table, as Rose fell asleep in Xavier's arms while Greshka leaned against his shoulder, Xavier thought about the magistrate's decree. It had seemed like such an imposition at the time, such an impossible demand. But it had given him everything that mattered: love, purpose, family, community. The treaty between humans and orcs had been forged in necessity and enforced through law. But here, in this farmyard, in this family, it had become something more. It had become real. It had become choice. It had become love. And that, Xavier thought as he carried his sleeping daughter to bed while his wife followed beside him, their hands intertwined, was the only kind of victory that truly mattered. Not the kind won on battlefields, but the kind built slowly over years through patience, respect, and the willingness to see beyond what you expected to what could actually be. Greshka had arrived at his farm with anger and trauma and every reason to hate him. He had been terrified and uncertain and completely unprepared. But they had chosen each other, day by day, through small kindnesses and large sacrifices, through work and laughter and honest conversation. They had built a marriage that was real not because a magistrate declared it so, but because they made it true through their choices. As Xavier settled Rose into her small bed and tucked the blankets around her, he felt Greshka's arms wrap around him from behind. She rested her chin on his shoulder and together they watched their daughter sleep. "Thank you," Greshka whispered. "For what? For not being what I expected, for being better, for giving me a reason to choose this life instead of just enduring it." Xavier turned in her arms and kissed her forehead, her tusks, her lips. "Thank you for choosing me, for taking a chance on the strange human who talked to his chickens and could not handle spicy food. I have trained your palate adequately," she said with mock seriousness. You can handle medium spice now. Only because I am motivated by love to suffer through your cooking." She swatted his arm, and he caught her hand, and they stood there in their daughter's room, holding each other in the peaceful darkness, completely content with the life they had built together from the most unlikely of beginnings. The magistrate's decree had ordered integration. Xavier and Greshka had created something far more valuable. A genuine partnership, a real love, and a family that would carry forward the best of both their peoples. And somewhere in the settlement, other couples were beginning their own journeys, learning that the strangers they had been assigned might become the partners they never knew they needed. But that was their story to tell. This one, the story of the settler who got the orc woman who bit 3 men, had reached its happy ending. Not because everything was perfect, but because 2 people had chosen to make something beautiful out of an impossible situation. They had chosen respect over prejudice, understanding over fear, and love over the easy path of resentment. And in a small cabin on a thriving farm at the edge of the Graythorn Valley, a family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they belonged to each other, and that their love was strong enough to weather any storm that might come. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Xavier and Greshka rose to face another day of the life they had built together. Rose woke with the sun, babbling happily as she always did, and they brought her to the kitchen table for breakfast. The simple domestic ritual felt sacred in its normalcy. This was what they had fought for, what the treaty had made possible. Not grand gestures or political victories, but the quiet miracle of an ordinary morning with the people you loved. As they ate, Rose in her high chair making a delightful mess of her porridge, a rider approached the farm. Xavier stepped out to meet them, Greshka following with Rose on her hip. The rider was young, barely more than a boy, wearing the colors of the settlement council. "Message for Thornwood and Ironjaw," he said, slightly nervous in Greshka's presence despite her friendly smile. Xavier took the sealed letter and opened it. His eyes widened as he read. "What is it?" Greshka asked. "The regional governor is coming to visit next month. He wants to tour successful treaty implementations and has specifically requested to meet us." Xavier looked up from the letter. "We are being held up as a model for the entire region." Greshka's expression was complicated. "I am not sure I want to be a model. I just want to live our life." "I know, but maybe sharing our story can help others. If even one couple finds hope from knowing that we made this work, would that not be worthwhile?" She considered this, then nodded slowly. "When you put it that way. But I am not pretending anything. If the governor comes, he sees us as we are, mess and all. Would I try to make you pretend?" Xavier asked, amused. "No, which is why I agreed." She shifted Rose to her other hip. "Though we should probably fix the barn roof before he arrives. It has been leaking again." They spent the following weeks preparing, not by creating a false image of perfection, but by simply maintaining their farm to the best of their ability. When the governor arrived with his entourage, he found a working farm, bustling with activity, where humans and orcs labored side by side. Governor Harold Wells was a practical man in his 50s, weathered by years of managing frontier territories. He surveyed the farm with an experienced eye, asked pointed questions about crop yields and livestock management, and watched how Xavier and Greshka moved around each other with the unconscious coordination of longtime partners. "This is impressive," he finally said as they sat down to lunch. "Not just the farm, though that is well run, but the integration. You have created something genuine here." "We had help," Xavier said. "Our neighbors, both human and orc, supported us, the Carver family especially." "And you had each other," the governor observed. That is the piece that seems to be missing in many of the failed matches. Mutual respect. He turned to Greshka. I have read the reports about your initial resistance to the marriage. What changed? Greshka finished chewing her food before answering, taking her time. Xavier did not treat me like property or a servant. He gave me space to choose how involved I wanted to be. He respected my strength instead of fearing it, and he made me feel like a partner, not an obligation. She glanced at Xavier with open affection. I stopped resisting when I realized I was not fighting against anything anymore. I was fighting for something. Fighting for what? For this. For a home where I could be all of myself. Warrior and farmer, orc and wife, strong and also allowed to be soft sometimes. She reached over and took Xavier's hand. For a marriage that was real because we chose it, even though it started as an order. The governor nodded thoughtfully. That is the story the region needs to hear. Too many people see the treaty marriages as punishment or obligation. They need to understand the potential for genuine partnership. Will you tell them the hard parts too? Greshka asked sharply. That I bit 3 men before Xavier, that I was hostile and angry for weeks, that this did not magically work overnight. Yes, the governor said, surprising her. Because that makes the success more meaningful. People need to know that difficult beginnings can lead to good endings if both parties are willing to try. After the governor departed, Xavier and Greshka stood in their farmyard as they had so many times before, watching the dust settle from the departing horses. You think it will help? Greshka asked. Sharing our story, I think it might give people hope. And sometimes hope is enough to make them try instead of giving up. That evening, as they put Rose to bed and settled in for the night, Greshka was quieter than usual. Xavier noticed but gave her space, learning long ago when to push and when to wait. Finally, as they lay in bed, she spoke. I never thought I would have this. A family. A home where I felt safe. The clan raised us to be warriors first and people second. There was no room for softness, for vulnerability. But you made room for all of me, even the parts I did not know existed. Xavier pulled her closer, feeling her strong frame relax against him. You did the same for me. I was just surviving before you came, going through motions, building a farm because I needed purpose, but not because I had any real passion for it. You made me want to build something bigger, something lasting. You gave me a reason to imagine a future beyond just the next harvest. Look at us, Greshka said with a soft laugh, getting sentimental in our old age. We are not old. You are what, 25? 26. Ancient by warrior standards. Most of my clan sisters were considered past their prime by now. Ridiculous. You are in your prime. You could still take down anyone foolish enough to challenge you. True, she agreed with no false modesty. But I would rather spend my energy building than fighting these days. I would rather teach Rose how to be strong than how to kill. That is what peace looks like, I think. Having the luxury to choose growth over survival. They fell asleep tangled together, and Xavier dreamed of the future. Of Rose growing up strong and kind. Of more children, perhaps. Of the farm expanding, of the community thriving, of a world where human and orc children played together without anyone thinking it remarkable. The years that followed proved that dreams could become reality with enough work and commitment. The farm flourished beyond Xavier's wildest expectations. With Greshka's management skills and his agricultural knowledge, they developed new techniques that other farmers began to adopt. They became respected voices in the settlement, consulted on everything from crop rotation to conflict resolution. Rose grew into a bright, energetic child who moved between human and orc communities with ease. She learned her father's language and her mother's, absorbed stories from both cultures, and seemed to intuitively understand how to bridge gaps between different people. By the time she was 5, she was already showing signs of the best qualities from both parents: Xavier's thoughtfulness and Greshka's strength, tempered with a kindness all her own. They had 2 more children over the following years. A son named Marcus, who had Xavier's gray eyes and Greshka's warrior spirit, and another daughter named Lyra, who was quieter than her siblings but possessed a brilliant mind for solving problems. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, rooms added as needed, until it bore little resemblance to the small bachelor homestead Xavier had originally built. The settlement grew as well. More orc families moved to the valley, drawn by reports of successful integration. More human settlers arrived, attracted by the fertile land and the promise of peace. The mixed marriages that had seemed so controversial in the beginning became commonplace, accepted, even celebrated. But Xavier and Greshka never forgot how hard won their peace had been. They made sure to mentor new couples, offering advice and support to those struggling with the adjustment. Greshka was particularly effective with orc women who had been assigned to the marriages against their will, helping them understand that resistance and acceptance were not mutually exclusive, that they could honor their strength while still choosing partnership. On their 10th anniversary, the settlement threw them a celebration. It was not just about their marriage, but about what their marriage represented. A decade of peace, a decade of growth, a decade of proving that different peoples could not just coexist but thrive together. As Xavier stood before the gathered crowd, Greshka beside him and their 3 children around them, he tried to find words for what he felt. 10 years ago, he began, I was a bachelor farmer, content enough but not particularly happy. Then the magistrate knocked on my door and told me I was getting married to an orc woman with a reputation for violence. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I will not lie and say I was not terrified, but I was also curious. And that curiosity, that willingness to see who Greshka actually was, instead of what I feared she might be, that was the beginning of everything. He looked at his wife, seeing the green-skinned warrior who had arrived hostile and hurt, and also seeing the woman she had become, confident, loved, at peace. Greshka taught me that strength and kindness are not opposites, that being a warrior and being gentle are not contradictions. She taught me what true partnership looks like, and she gave me a family I never dreamed I could have. Greshka stepped forward, and the crowd quieted to hear her speak. I came to this farm expecting the worst, expecting to be treated as less than human, as property, as something to be controlled. Instead, I found a man who saw me as an equal, who gave me the space to choose my own path, even when it would have been easier for him to force my compliance. Her voice grew stronger. Xavier did not tame me. He did not break me. He simply respected me enough to let me choose him back. And that made all the difference. The celebration lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and too much food. Xavier watched his children playing with human and orc friends alike, saw his neighbors embracing across cultural lines, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Not because of anything he had done alone, but because of what they had all built together. Later, much later, when the guests had gone and the children were asleep and the farm was quiet again, Xavier and Greshka sat on their porch as they had so many times over the years. 10 years, Greshka mused. It feels like both forever and no time at all. Do you ever wish things had been different, that you had been allowed to choose for yourself from the beginning? She thought about it seriously. No, because if I had been allowed to choose, I would have chosen wrong. I would have chosen safety in the clan, chosen what was familiar. I would never have taken the risk of trusting a human, of opening myself to this possibility. The decree forced me out of my comfort zone, and I am grateful for that now, even though I hated it at the time. I am grateful too, Xavier admitted. Grateful that the magistrate saw something in me that made him think I could handle the most difficult assignment. Grateful that you were willing to give me a chance after the others failed you. Grateful for every day since. Sentimental man, Greshka said, but she was smiling. Fierce woman, he replied and kissed her. They sat there as the stars wheeled overhead, comfortable in the silence, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting. The marriage that had begun as a magistrate's order had become the foundation of their entire world. The orc woman who had bitten 3 men had found a 4th man worth not biting, and together they had created a legacy that would echo through generations. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for. To love and be loved in return, to build something meaningful, and to leave the world a little better than they found it. Xavier and Greshka had done all of that and more. Their story, which had started with hostility and fear, had become a testament to the power of respect, patience, and the willingness to see beyond surface differences to the person underneath. It was a story that would be told in the settlement for years to come, inspiring other unlikely couples to take the risk of genuine partnership. But for Xavier and Greshka, it was not a story at all. It was simply their life, beautiful in its ordinary moments and extraordinary in its depth. It was morning coffee shared on the porch, hands touching across the table. It was working side by side in the fields, moving in unconscious harmony. It was raising their children with values from both cultures, watching them become bridges between worlds. It was growing old together, bodies changing but commitment unwavering. The magistrate had ordered every settler to take an orc wife. Xavier had gotten the one who bit 3 men. And in doing so, he had gotten everything he never knew he needed: a partner, a love, a family, and a future brighter than any he could have imagined. As they finally went inside for the night, Greshka paused in the doorway and looked back at the farm spread out before them in the moonlight. "We did well, Xavier Thornwood." "We did well, Greshka Ironjaw," he agreed, and together they closed the door on another perfect day in their imperfect, beautiful, hard-won life.